Hello, I am Richard Fife, and welcome to JordanCONline, the con that isn't, as we provide you some content. Here is a panel from the writer's track called JordanCon's Got Slush, where our panelists of editors are going to read some advanced submitted work that has been anonymously submitted, the first few pages of a manuscript, and give us their honest, sometimes harsh, but constructive criticisms. Let's meet our panel. Start off with Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa McArthur. I'm the associate publisher at Falstaff Books. I've been working as a freelance editor for 6 or 7 years now, and taught college writing for about 15 years.
Thank you, Melissa. John?
Hi, I'm John Hartness. I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books, as well as a science fiction and fantasy author, podcaster, YouTuber, and everything I learned about editing, I learned from Deborah Dixon. So if you hate me when we're done, it's her fault.
Thank you, John. Venessa.
Hi, I'm Venessa Giunta. I am also part of the Falstaff cult. Company. I'm a developmental editor there. I've recently started. Prior to that, I was an acquiring editor for a small e-romance ebook publisher for 10 years. And I'm also a freelance fiction editor. I'm also an author. It's my book. And that's me.
Okay. Thank you, Venessa. And Debra.
Hi, I'm Deborah Dixon. I'm one of the founders and publisher of Bell Books and its imprints, Bell Bridge Books and Imagine Books. We publish a wide range of fiction. We have been publishing books for about 21 years now. And prior to that, I published with several New York publishers and was vice president of a national writing organization. So I've been on both sides of the manuscript, as it were.
Okay, thank you. So to start off, just a little bit of discussion about what we're even going to be looking at. What is it we mean when we say the slush
pile? I'll jump in. A slush pile is unedited work that's been submitted to a company. It may or may not even fit the genres we're publishing. It's one of the reasons we call it slush, because it just comes in and it gets put in a stack until someone has time, volunteer time, to read the pile.
It's the slush pile is how you weed out those people who say, I want to be in publishing. And if they survive a couple of months going through slush, then they actually might really want to be in publishing.
That's right.
And figure out who can follow directions and not.
Yes.
I know, speaking from Falstaff, which is we're a very small independent press. We take, what were we at, Melissa? 0.1% of
I think so, yeah.
unsolicited submissions.
Mm-hmm.
So
every intern we've ever had comes in desperate to read the slush, and about a week later they're going, do I have to?
Yeah, that
when you find that one diamond that's in that pile, it's like the heavens have opened up.
Oh yeah. And one of the main reasons that we do as many conventions as we do is to circumvent the slush pile. We stay closed for submissions because with 20 or so convention appearances each year, I get to meet writers and go do things like this where it's already partially vetted before I see it. So it saves us a lot of time. So this is one of the best workarounds writers can do to jump the line.
And I'd point out that a slush pile specifically is unsolicited manuscripts. And what John's talking about is when you go and you meet an editor or an agent or whatever, and you talk about your book and they say, okay, send it to me. That bypasses, like he's saying, it bypasses the slush pile and it's a solicited manuscript then. And that's why It's really to authors' advantage to go to conventions and to buck up their courage and actually walk up to industry pros and talk to them, because that's kind of what's expected. The industry pros are expecting you to talk to them. That's why they're there. So I know a lot of authors have many feels around the idea of approaching an industry pro because they don't want to seem overbearing, they don't want to seem pushy. It's sometimes embarrassing to talk about your own writing and to, sell yourself. But I really, really encourage authors to do it anyway. Just be brave, just for a minute. So
I would not be published by Bellbridge if I had not gone to conventions and sucked up to Deb.
True. We did.
And I have bought manuscripts from JordanCon. We have books on our shelf and books coming out from people that I met at JordanCon. So it does work.
I'm working on development of a story from an author I met at SagaCon.
Awesome.
Just the beginning of March. So
that's fantastic.
That's cool. Yay.
Okay. Well, so the format of the rest of the panel is I'm going to be the poor narrator that actually has to read all these. I have not advanced read them myself. None of our panelists have advanced read these. So everything is our very first impression. So pardon any stumbles I have. This is nightmare flashbacks to elementary school of being asked to read aloud.
If there's more than one apostrophe in the high fantasy name, you're automatically getting an X from Blaylock.
If you don't have the right vowel to consonant ratio, too many or too few. So before we started the recording, we have already pre-selected the order of the 8 stories that we have been submitted. And we'll go ahead and get started with our first one. So this is a story called Cyborg. It is a science fantasy novel of 78,000 words. Just change my screen a little bit here, because as people, I guess the other thing I should have mentioned is that as our panelists hit spots where they would stop reading, they were going to signal to me, raise their hands, and if all 4 of them raise their hands, we stop reading. So we'll see if we get to the end of these. And it's only 600 words, and if you can get through the first 600 words, which tends to be a very important thing in a submission, to get past those first couple pages, to get your editor's attention, that's a good sign. And then we'll discuss what we thought about it after the reading. So, Cyborg, science fantasy novel, 78,000 words. And there goes my library. That's what I get for being cheap on it. Okay. Chapter 1. The Human Alliance knew we were fucked when the war machines started using magic. We fought back anyway. Sergeant Jack Sweet. I stopped believing in God before the first missiles even hit the ground. They found us, I think, as I stare through the window of our in-ground bunker, standing on my toes so I can see outside. Streaks of fire carved through the night sky, lighting the rolling hills around us. The bunker to my right explodes with the thundering boom, sending concrete and flames high into the air. It won't be the last. The war machines storm our facility from the north, their man-shaped metallic bodies glimmering in the flame. Wow, okay.
I told you, I'm Simon.
Were you up first? I wasn't looking at who was up first.
I think I was.
The opening line was so strong. I was hoping that he would clear his throat and get out of this and move on to something with a character we could care about, settle us, ground us, instead of just blowing things up. So
yeah, I typically for this genre don't like present tense, and
Ding.
I wanted to put my hand up at I stop, but I kept going just for a little longer, just
Yeah.
hoping, but
I would
it
have.
didn't get
I
there.
actually did the same. I would have. I went to, I think, like the third paragraph, but I really would have stopped reading into the second, because it's.
Yeah.
I just don't.
I think I would have jumped ahead much more quickly just to see if, because the idea is, the opening's very clever. I'm very sad that I didn't like it after that. So.
Yeah. Same.
The epigraph at the top was so strong that
Yeah.
I would have stopped reading after the first sentence and sent an email that said, put this in first person past tense
Exactly.
and resubmit, and I'll look at it.
Yeah.
But and I would tell them in the email, I stopped at sentence 1 because first person present is so hard to pull off.
Yes.
And we're in the business of selling books, so we do have to hit genre expectations. And first person present tense is currently, it's a YA thing.
Yes.
And
So,
the bigger problem, I think, with the submission, and it is in some ways an issue with present tense, we lose point of view. We lose worldview. That opening gave us a worldview, a point of view, a character, and then we just have physical things happening later, and we lose that point of view. Hi, Kat.
hi, Garfield.
Garfield.
It's our special guest.
Yeah, you're locked away. So
For me, I really like, because just eyeballing, just skimming that whole first page, I feel like it would have worked in past tense. I feel like it would have, like, they could have done, more with it. It would have been stronger.
right.
So,
Yeah.
Right.
But
Also, and boy, this is pot calling the kettle black stuff, but it also speaks to something I talk about in videos called reader equity. In other words, I've sold a pile of books, so I get away with crap that unpublished authors don't get away with.
Right.
78,000 words is short for sci-fi. It's science fiction, science fantasy readers tend to want heftier books. I would, depending on the story, I'm going to want that either shorter and tighter and make it a novella, or I'm going to want it at 95 to 120K.
Yeah,
Because-
they've got to drop us into a world. Right now, it's anywhere, anytime, firefight, which doesn't live up to the promise of the opening.
it made
Yeah.
me think of,
Right.
it actually kind of made me think of the opening of Firefly, where it's all the, so like, I think they could do it. They just need to do it better, I think.
Mhm.
I think
And
too,
the
there's a
epigraph.
whole lot that's not specific.
Yeah.
They use words like they, someone, them, and we don't know who any of those people are. So there's
No.
nobody to connect with.
No, it's too generic. It needs more specificity.
Yep.
And the opening epigraph feels like the first line of The Martian, which is a good hook, but then we lose it.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
Yep. Has potential, but it's not there.
Absolutely. I'd love to see it submitted in past tense with an emphasis on making it a unique world, giving the characters point of view and depth, and going somewhere with it, even though it is sitting squarely with one foot in science fiction and one foot in fantasy, which can sometimes be a harder
Yeah.
sell.
Okay. Well, thank you, brave soul number 1. Moving on to our second story. Title, Brood Noir. Genre, SF speculative fiction, 80,000 words. Wes closes the door, listening for the first click of the lock as his eyes adjust to the candlelit darkness of his townhome. His patience is rewarded by a single click, and his ears turn their attention to any noise inside the house. Oh, wow. And if I read a little past your hands, it's because I'm having to look at that out of the side of my eye, but that was quick as well.
Well, we're all gonna be harsh because getting through Slush is nigh impossible. It's hard. I don't know who was first because when I pop up the document on my screen, I can't see Venessa, but I know Melissa beat me.
I was probably last.
Yeah.
And that's just because I'm trying not to be Simon.
You're being Alicia.
You can be Randy if you say dog enough. For me, it was repetition. And how many times does your lock click? And candlelit darkness? Huh? Is it lit? It's either lit or it's dark.
Right.
And then I tell writers, unless it's for emphasis or an article, don't ever use the same word twice in the same sentence, and try very hard not to use the same word in the same paragraph. So click, click, done.
Yeah.
For me,
There's no voice here. Go ahead, Melissa, you go ahead.
There's there are a couple of things. One, present tense. But there's a lot
Yeah,
of,
Melissa did actually just tentatively when that presentation, she's like,
yeah. But there's a lot of passive voice. There's a lot of is, to be verbs. It's almost all hearing sensory details. There's not a whole lot that is uses the other four senses. And also, it doesn't feel like I expected more noir. It feels more like a, I don't know, like I'm watching NCIS or something, not that older noir that I was hoping for with the title.
Yeah. For me, it was also the present tense was the first thing, but I kept along for a couple lines. But when it got to the fact that his ears are particularly sentient because they turn their attention to a noise, that's always, and yeah, to be honest, like I will sometimes go back, because that's a fix. We can fix that. But there was just so much for me because, again, like Melissa said, the passive verbs, and it feels super pretentious because it's like, it's the second sentence, for example, his patience is rewarded by a single click and his ears turn their attention to any noise that sound inside the house itself. That's so long a sentence for so little information, you know? He heard a click, and so he started listening harder, you know? I mean, those might not be the words I use, but it just seemed like it was too many words. And sometimes noir is like that, but like Melissa said, I didn't get that feel. I didn't get the
there's no atmosphere.
Yes, that's exactly the problem.
Thank you. That's the word.
Yes, that's it exactly.
Exactly. And lest someone think that we're just first person snobs, I publish an author, Howard Odence, and he does write in young adult. He writes in first person. I don't mind it at all, but it has to be done in a way that can submerge us in character and atmosphere and create an experience, as opposed to just rattling off, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened.
And you're talking about present tense, not necessarily first person though, right? Because this is...
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant present tense. Sorry, I meant present tense.
Definitely look at commas with compound sentences. Because they're all missing.
Yes. So just as a rule of thumb, if each part can work independently as a sentence on its own, there should be a comma before the and, or whatever conjunction you're using. So.
And one of the things that there's a lot of description, there's a lot of things happening, but one of the things that Deb has spent the last decade beating my head in about is sensory specificity. There's no sense of smell, there's no temperature, there's just this happens, this is happening, this is happening. Your ears are turning, but you're not hearing anything but the click. So
I'd also
more
add,
senses.
I'd also add that one of the things about this, and as a reader, I find it annoying, is that we have no idea what anything about this story is about until the last sentence of that paragraph. Like, he could be coming home from the grocery store. He could be coming home from a liaison with a lover. He could be coming home from a walk in the park with his dog and he lost his dog. He could be coming home from anything. I don't have any concept of what this story is.
I think too that some of the word choice makes it even more confusing, because like a candlelit, you know, if you don't know what's going on, the first thing that most people think when they see candlelit is romance. At least, you know, I do.
And also,
but then you have,
if there's a paramilitary group, it sounds
right
like it's modern. So why do you have candlelight? Why are you lighting your house with candles? Like,
right.
You know, so and it's just atmosphere and setting. I don't understand
it's not grounded in anything.
Yes.
I do think that one mistake that folks, when they send in their unsolicited submission, they make the mistake of thinking that we're very carefully going to read their query letter and we're very carefully going to read the synopsis. We are not. So we are just coming to your book blind. And so that, I think, something that you need to think about is to hand your work to complete strangers who don't love you, don't know you, know nothing about what you write, and give it to them and then ask them to tell you, do they understand it? What's going on? And you'll be really surprised that what is in your head might not necessarily be on the piece of paper.
Yes.
Or the screen.
When I used to part of my job as an acquiring editor was we would read the Slush. There were several of us. They would just divide it up. And I would glance at the query to see what type of story it was. And I wouldn't even look at the synopsis. I'd start reading. And if the sample kept me going, then I'd look at the synopsis. Because I'm not going to waste my time reading a synopsis about a story if the writing isn't there. So I think that's a really, really good point. So, and not to say that this would not be a great story. If you're the author, please do not take this and go and stab your eyes out. Don't do that. Because, this could have, potential. Just work on tightening it up and work on making it grounded.
One of the things that the first year I was at JordanCon, we did some variation on the writer's workshop, and we did it in a bar. We did it in the hotel bar and split up and paired off with authors. And I think James Tuck and I had five different submissions. 4 of the 5 started in the wrong place. That may be what's happening here. This book might not start in the right place, but if it's an unsolicited manuscript, you're never going to get read that deeply. We just won't know. Your book has to start in the right place.
And that's really common, that finding the place to start is one of the hardest things that an author has to accomplish when putting together a book.
And often you don't even actually know that until you're done with the book. You go back and you reread it and you look at it, and it's easier to see where you should have started it.
Yeah, I still have issues with it today. I've been published for 10, 11 years now, and 24 novels, and I still have books that I'm like, oh, well, I'm now on chapter 3, and here's where the book starts.
Yep. I routinely,
nice
with my authors, working on the opening is one of the things we do, because it's so important for the book, for the reader.
Yes, it is. When we redid the Black Knight Chronicles, when Deb bought those, we took those 3 books apart and took a chapter off the beginning of book 2 and added a whole new chapter.
I guess one thing I'm actually hearing here that I'll comment on is that while these first 2 stories, got all the hands in the first couple sentences, it's not that you're looking for a perfect publish-ready opening. You're just looking for something that's stronger than what we've seen so far.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah, and I'll generally peek. I'll go and I'll look a little bit down and I'll flip a page over just to make sure the author doesn't need to clear their throat and then they settle in. But if I've peeked a few places and I still haven't found a place I can settle in, I'm done.
Same.
And I've scrolled on both of these.
I have to.
Yeah, me too.
Mm.
It's really important for authors when they start a story that they're grounded in setting, they're grounded in character, and they're grounded in action. Like, those are the things we need to know in an opening. We need to know who we're rooting for or who we're sitting with right now. We need to know where we are, and we need to know what's happening. You know, so like if we don't know those things, then there's no reason for us to keep reading. You know, everybody's super busy and we all need to invest our time in what we need to invest our time in. And we don't have time to slog through several pages to try to figure out what's going on and who we're supposed to like. And you know, nobody has time for that.
So those things you would say need to be in the first couple sentences.
Yeah.
I need a hook in the first couple of sentences, and a really strong first sentence will probably buy you a couple of paragraphs.
Yes, true.
Or a really good voice.
Yeah, really good. Any of those things will buy you a little more time.
Because we want you to succeed. We are reading this because we're hoping to find something awesome.
We're looking
so
for the diamond.
It may not sound like it, but we are rooting for you.
Yeah.
For new authors.
Looking for the diamond.
Well, we don't get paid.
It's volunteer work.
If we don't publish great books, we don't make money.
That's right.
I mean, at the end of the day, the publisher makes money off selling books. So we're looking for the most awesome, commercially viable product that we can create.
Okay, on to the third one. Okay, this is The Crystal Sword, Fantasy, 150,000 words. Prologue. This is an old story, told with new words. This story is already over, but for you, dear reader, this is the beginning. Not your beginning, of course, but a beginning. This story is for you. For those who are lost or found. For those in bright places or dark places. For those who wander or are standing still. For young or for old, time is only a construct. Come and imagine. Stay a while and listen. Let me tell you a story. Chapter 1. MC*, main character placeholder, grumbled to themselves in the crow's nest. The two water skins were in the shaded bucket with them. The mentor had helped build the sunshade. Okay. There's Venessa.
I was getting through that funky poem to try to see what the story was.
You almost had me before you opened your mouth, because 150K from an unknown writer, it had better be amazing, because I'm going to have to price that print book so high that it's going to be really hard to sell a book that's that long, because we're a print-on-demand publisher. But, okay, I'm going to jump past the prologue, because prologues are out of vogue, and prologues are just out of vogue, and if you're not Lemony Snicket, don't put Dear Reader in your book ever.
No.
But this isn't a finished book, and don't submit a damn unfinished book. I don't care who you are. Do not waste my time. This wouldn't just get rejected. This name I would have a hard time looking at the next thing this writer submitted, because this isn't a finished book. There's multiple placeholders through here. They haven't determined gender of the main character. I scrolled further. There's weapons that haven't been named. This isn't finished. This isn't a book.
Just give them an example, John. parentheses, other dash sailor dash male dash placeholder name in parentheses stuck ahead up over the nest.
Yeah.
So but for me, what I did is I just took that as, okay, they were wanting to, just get this in for the sample or whatever. I would not expect to see this in a real submission. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
But if just like I wasn't looking at that in terms of rejection or acceptance or whatever, as far as this, for me, I saw this as an exercise for them. Like, okay, I want to see what they have to say about my first couple pages. I don't have any of this stuff yet, but I'm going to send it because we're having this panel. It's not really for submission. I would assume that if they're actually submitting it, that this is all going to be worked out. So like, I'm not looking at it in the same way you are, John.
Yeah. And I would give them that much credit if I hadn't gotten so much slush.
No, I've gotten some stuff like that, but I really think that in this case, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the rest of it. And I also, during the poem, I skipped the whole little poem part. I wouldn't have made that a prologue anyway. I would have made a little epigraph at the beginning if they
It's easy to say cut, with that.
Yeah, and right, and we can cut it out. That's not a big deal. But when we got to I didn't even make it through the first paragraph because there's lots of passive verbs again, and fragments, and
there's not a single compound sentence in that first paragraph.
There are a lot of fragments though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a whole lot of fragments, even words further down.
Yeah.
Just about anything that starts with an ing word is a fragment.
Yeah. I would also, I would actually, this particular author, I would really recommend you look at writing, some writing courses, or, it's not the worst I've seen. Let me just be clear about that. But I think that some of the words work, the sunshade is delicate, that is not a bad, descriptor, right? It's a good descriptor, I think, but I think that this particular author doesn't quite know how to put their words together effectively yet. So I think right now, especially during the quarantine, there's a whole bunch of free or very low priced writing courses and things like that groups and professional authors and stuff are doing. If you can get in on those, maybe get a book or two, maybe get Deb's Goals, Motivation, and Conflict. Because I think that they've got a good vocabulary going on. I just don't think that they're effective in putting the words together in the best way. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
And if they're looking for a really grammar focused kind of thing, there's a website, it's Grammar Bites, BYTES, and it has great grammar practice exercises. And it looks kind of strange because it's like you open it up and there's a big shark on the front. It's chompchomp.com, CHOMP. But it has sound effects and all kinds of cool stuff, but it explains why they're right or wrong. And it does a lot of stuff with fragments, and if anybody needs help with commas, that's the one I always gave my college students. And yeah,
I always recommend good old tried and true Strunk and White, as well as a much newer book really focusing on why grammar is important to your communication, which is Eats, Shoots, and Leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think those are great books for somebody who really wants to dig in. And I'm going to go check out Chomp Chomp. I didn't know about Chomp Chomp. Sounds great.
It's super fun. You get like virtual prizes and all kinds of cool stuff.
Oh,
there's
there's Deb's new quarantine activity.
Oh,
We're nerds.
I know.
I'll
YouTube
never
videos.
see that website in my life.
Yeah, you will. I'll show it to you. I know where you live.
Damn it. She does too.
Okay. Well, let us move on to the next submission. Okay. The Amber Society, Fantasy Cosmic Horror, 150,000 words.
Whew.
Demon blood stained the door in a crude finger-painted triangle. Under the glow of the street lamp, the dried ichor emanated a faint red aura. Felsie stepped out of the rain and took a closer look at it. A short, scruffy-looking man appeared by her elbow. "Going to open it, Blondie?" he asked. "Or were you hoping this flood would take us to the roof?" Felsie smiled patronizingly. "Can you even swim, Tal?" She took off her glove and began to scratch at the marking with her thumbnail. The blood flaked off the wood like cheap paint. Can't be that hard, can it?" asked Tal, though he looked dubiously at the ankle-deep water running through the street behind him. He shifted to get a look at her work. His amber eyes smoldered like coals in the lamplight. "Anything interesting?" "Looks like trouble," she replied, picking her nail clean and replacing her glove. "Let's see what the good captain wants." The door opened noisily, and hot air, pungent with death, struck Felsie like a brick. "That's a smell that never gets old," Tell said sardonically. The foyer looked clean and well-ordered and brightly lit. Felsie might have called it picturesque if the stench wasn't overwhelming. The captain of the city watch stood at the top of the stairs, decked in a brown long coat adorned with patches of chainmail. He was giving orders to a young watchman, but he stopped abruptly when he noticed Felsie and Tell entering. She waved him off and climbed down to meet them. Felsie stopped at the foot of the stairs and bowed. "Captain Hawkins, how can we be of service?" "Miss Blackwood, Mr. Baines," the captain said with a strained cordiality. "My men haven't touched any of the bodies, but no one has entered the room. It's clearly society business." Her face was placid, but Felsie caught the edge of resentment in the captain's tone. Tal must have heard it too. "Would you rather we go home, Red?" he asked. Hawkins' face twitched slightly, but she was otherwise composed. "I don't like standing aside with while murderers run rampant. The bodies are in the parlor." The guard captain stepped down from the stair and led Felsie and Tal to a door where the stench of decay was strongest. Two watchmen barred the way, holding mirrored shields toward the door. They stepped aside gracefully when Felsie and Tal approached. The door squealed as Felsie nudged it open with her foot. In the middle of the room, a young girl in tattered blue dress had been impaled on a stake driven into the floor. A dozen corpses surrounded her, arranged in various states of prostration. The carpet had been ripped up, and someone had drawn a circle in dark ink beneath the bodies. Each corpse in the ring had a different set of symbols and annotations written on their back. "Yeah, I think that qualifies as our business," Tell muttered. "Looks like it," Felsie agreed quietly. She stepped wearily, cautiously, to avoid stumbling over evidence or into a trap. All of the furniture had been shoved haphazardly to the walls, leaving few places to stage an ambush. Tal gasped sharply as they circled to get a better look at the scene. "She's just a kid, Fel." "I see her." She extracted a green stone from her pocket and tossed it in the circle. When nothing happened, she knelt to inspect one of the prone corpses and pulled its lips open with her thumb and grimaced. "This man's been dead for at least 3 days. Recognize the glyphs?" Okay, we got all the way through that submission. Only
Me and
half
Melissa, we
attrition.
were holding out.
I know.
It only took 4. That's
Yep.
pretty good.
Yeah.
I've done these before where we didn't make it all the way through any of them.
Yeah. I mean, this does have some things that could be fixed. There's quite a bit of adverbs. There's one sentence that doesn't have a period at the end of it. Those kinds of things. But I like the story, and I like the characters, and I like the conflict, and I like the setting. I'm not 100% sure about the setting, but
that can be fixed. We can figure it. That
Right.
can be figured out. That can be worked
I
out.
would have stopped only to check the synopsis,
Mhm.
and then I would have handed it off to one of my readers and said, "Tell me why I have to buy this." And then walk over hot coals, when they come back and say, "Oh my gosh," because I got a little concerned about some of the dialogue in a group scene, some of the adverb usage. I mean, it would need a lot of laser focus editing. And that's a lot of work to do unless this book just drags somebody through it all the way to the end. So
Once upon a time, a wise professional in this industry told me that they have about enough bandwidth to take on one writer a year that's going to need their attention and work. And that writer had better be able to kick ass and sell books. And I have adopted that philosophy along with many that I have stolen from said person who's on this panel.
I wonder who that could have been.
I don't know.
You have this. I would have done exactly what Deb did. I would have gotten to the point where I raised my hand, and I would have sent it to Teresa, one of our other editors, and said, "Read this. Tell me if it's amazing," because she's who gets Lovecraft.
Mhm.
And then I would say, okay, and then tell them to cut 30 or 40,000 words out of it,
Definitely that.
Yeah.
and that they're allowed one adverb every 50,000 words.
Mhm.
And they would get a revise and resubmit.
Mhm.
If Teresa loved it, they get a revise and resubmit with a upper word count of 100,000 words
Mhm.
and 2 adverbs in that 100,000 words.
So for me, this is like totally right up my alley. I like
Mine too.
horror. I love murder mysteries. Yeah, because we were just talking about Criminal Minds earlier, right?
Yeah.
So this is like up my alley. This is much more than the other 2 that we've read, or 3 that we've read, however many. This is my kind of story. For the author, I feel like you need more of your main character's feelings in there, like more of a sense of her reactions to what's happening in there. Also agree with there's more passive verbs and adverbs than I'd ever be comfortable with. And the dialogue, read the dialogue out loud, because when you read it out loud, your ear is going to hear what your eye isn't seeing.
Your
And
ear's going to hear that Tal only refers to people by their hair color.
Yeah.
I mean, that could also be an affectation. Like that could be a characterization, right? So like if it's on purpose, that's fine.
Yes.
But if it's not, everything needs to be with intention, right?
Yep.
So those are my my notes to the author. As far as acceptance, a lot would depend on the synopsis. It would probably most likely also be a revise and resubmit, because that's too freaking long. They're gonna have to cut.
This is a story. I like the guts of this story.
Yeah.
It checks a lot of my boxes too. It checks a lot of boxes for a lot of things that we publish.
Mhm.
But it's
not ready.
I'd say it's 80% there.
Yeah, it's much closer than any of the others we've seen. And
Absolutely.
It
was good enough that I would have stopped and said, okay, I don't have time to take this on and read this unless it's fabulous. I'm going to give it to somebody who likes this kind of fiction, because I want to give it the best chance possible. I already know what I would have to do with it, and I'd read the synopsis, and then we'd go from there. But
yes.
Yep.
So good job, author. This was a good one.
Yeah.
Yay.
Speaking of the dialogue, the one line, she's just a kid fell. It's probably the best line of dialogue in that whole bit.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So that part was good.
And I certainly hope that all of the authors that are watching this understand that we're coming at this with a very specific set of criteria, particularly Deb and I, because there are so few publication slots available. I mean, you guys put out a ton of books every year. We put out a ton of books every year. And the authors that we're already working with take up most of those available slots.
Right.
And then, I go to conventions and I sit in somebody's hotel room and they talk to me about 7-book series. And I'm like, okay, fine, we're in.
How many slots?
Where am I going to fit that?
Yeah.
And then Melissa's like, all right, let me rearrange stuff.
Right.
That's the Zoom after this Zoom.
Yeah.
And I do think that we need more, just so people can get an idea when we're going, hey, this is going to need a lot of editing. For instance, Felsie says she it looks like it. Felsie agreed quietly. She stepped wearily, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you've got a couple of adverbs there, but the bigger problem is if she stepped wearily, you could have given me something. Why is she weary? Is it physical? Is this emotional? With a much better structured sentence there, which I don't know because I haven't read the book yet. You could give us a window into what makes Felsie tick or what she's up against and has been up against for a while now. We don't, so there's a missed opportunity there. So I think it's really, I agree, it's there, but it's going to need a lot of ticky-tacky editing to really bring it up to the level that you want to grab the reader by the throat with.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that people need to understand is that the level of edits that you get from the four of us is a lot deeper than a lot of stuff you're finding in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
Deb uses her edits to me as an example of how deep she'll go on a line edit of a book. Because, and I talk to
with
people.
His permission. With
Yeah.
his permission.
Well, I tell people that when I sold the Black Knight Chronicles to Bellbridge, my first edit letter was 14 pages single spaced. Before we get to the manuscript.
That's some good editing right there.
13 pages of that stuff was right, and we'll never talk about.
But that is also a testament to how much she believed in your work. So if the editor is willing to take on, and they know that you're going to be some work, you need to like, as an author, I need to appreciate that. I need to appreciate that they're willing to take a chance on me and they're working their butt off. And that means I need to match that level and exceed it. I need to work my butt off even more than they are, because ultimately it's my name on the book, right? So if they're willing to help me put that work in, I'm gonna like grab that shovel and start freaking digging, right? So,
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and if an editor looks at you and says, "You've got a voice, you know how to tell a story. I'm willing to work with you, but there might be some pain involved. Are you up for that?"
Sign the contract.
Sign the contract.
Yeah. Seriously.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Seriously. So, hey.
Read the contract first.
Read the contract first.
Yes.
Okay, ready to move on to the next one?
Yes.
Okay. So, Coming Home, a fantasy, 85,000 words. Where did that creature come from, and how exactly did he get on my roof? Miss Beth's normally kind and welcoming features were calm and her voice steady, but her eyes held a dangerous light, arms crossed. The owner of the home, the habitat for olden magical entities, had seen worse. She cleared her throat and took a deep breath before continuing in her quietly commanding tone. Who do I have to thank for the unwelcomed guest in our home? Joe? Agatha? She looked back and forth between the two wizened faces before her. For their parts, Joe and Agatha, despite being decades older than Mrs. Beth, looked more akin to children awaiting a particularly nasty scolding from their mother than a powerful wizard and witch they were. Masters of the magical... Okay.
I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it.
Tighten it up.
No.
Yeah, there's way too much passive verbs, way too much passive voice. And I didn't know until the second paragraph that Miss Beth was actually our point of view character. Did anybody else not get that?
Yeah.
I didn't get, it
wasn't clear.
I thought our point, in the first paragraph, I thought our point of view character was listening to Miss Beth.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was observational.
Right, because it's observational. So Miss Beth's normally kind and welcoming features were calm and her voice steady. She doesn't know what her features look like. She's on the inside looking out. So like that tells me that it's someone else looking at her. So I was just, That was confusing. I'm intrigued by the idea of it. I recently actually did an edit, well, not recently, it was several months ago now, I think late last year, did an edit on a magical thing with an older protagonist, like senior, like boomer age protagonist, which was kind of fun. And this kind of reminds me of that. I had an issue at the very beginning. You remember, John, you mentioned at, I think, the first one about how you don't want to have, or second one, you don't want to have the same word in the same paragraph. Well, you've got the word come in the very first line right after the title. And that put me off a little bit. So
this feels to me, is it Alona Andrews that writes
the innkeeper sweeper.
Yeah,
things.
Clean Sweep, I think, was the first one.
Sweep of the Blade, I think.
Yeah, this feels like it wants to hit that tone, but it's not tight. This is, it needs to pick it up.
Yeah, those books move really fast, and they have the same kind of features as this seems to have, kind of a normal looking home, but it's not the age differences between like Mrs. Beth and Joe and Agatha. So it has a lot of those similar kinds of themes, but like John said, it needs to be a whole lot tighter.
For me, I felt that it was a little young. It wasn't sharp enough, edgy enough, contemporary enough for the adult reader. The writing was, it was okay, but it just really felt almost more young adult, actually middle grade to me, than something for adults contemporary now. So for me, it just didn't seem like something that I could pick up for our list. So I kept reading thinking, okay, tell me what you are. And I didn't get a real strong feeling for what this book wanted to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Short and sweet. On to the next one. Unfinished Creatures. Fantasy at 70,000 words. In spite of its name, the Noble was an unimpressive structure. The gray facade of the Gentleman's Club was streaked with dirt, and a thin stream of brownish sludge trickled from the corner of a second-story window. Perhaps the marquee lights promised a shadow of the past decade's glamour, but the venue was dark. Its guests had been ushered into the night to make room for a police investigation. A normie patrolman wearing a bored expression was stationed at the door. The call that brought Finn here had been brief. Her superior officer's clipped tone laying out a series of events suggesting particularly dark magic. She left the Queen's apartment she'd only just returned to in a rush. Her low heels echoed an uneven tap, tap, tap down the street as she approached the Noble, trying to avoid putting too much weight on her blistered right foot. Whoever had mandated these shoes as part of the uniform had either not expected... Okay.
It's taking too long to get into it.
This book doesn't start in the right place.
Yes.
Right.
I can't tell if it's going to be a book when it gets to where it's starting, but this is not the beginning of, this is not where this book needs to start.
Right.
It doesn't feel like fantasy either.
It feels like urban fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like I think the descriptions are really good. I really like the descriptions. I don't particularly like the punctuation. There's a lot of wrong punctuation in there, but I like the descriptions, but I agree, it doesn't start in the right place. It makes me think, it's got a magical thing going on, and, the normie patrolman, makes me think that, okay, there's something not normie, but and I liked, you remember how, Deb, you said earlier about there was that one sentence in there in the other good one about how it was a perfect opportunity to explain why Felsi was weary or whatever.
Mhm.
I really liked that they put, toward the end of that first page, trying to avoid putting too much weight on her blistered right foot. That was
Yeah.
that was a neat little detail
Yeah.
that made me go, oh, what's going on with the foot, right? So there are things in it I liked, and things in it I thought were cool, but I agree, it's not, this is not the beginning of the story.
The time period is a little off as well. It's not immediately clear where we are in time. Are we in an alternate future that includes some of these older terms, or are we actually, it's at a period piece fantasy? That was part of my issue. Is when a book opens, I like to be grounded. I like to, to be in the moment. I don't have to know everything, but I do have to understand literally right here, right now, what I'm reading. And I had too many concerns about where are we in time? What's the deal here? So for me, that was a real issue that I think needs to be tightened up. It was kind of a classic example of somebody driving somewhere to get to the action, except she was walking somewhere to get to the action. So, it needed to start more quickly. We needed to get to the meat and bones.
So I just scrolled down to the end, and here's like the last couple lines. I see. Well, you've got a hell of a first case, Miller. How familiar are you with necromancy? Grace asked, flicking open a notebook. That's where it looks interesting to me. That may not be either, but I'm like, oh, that looks cool. What's after that?
Yeah.
Yep. That's the thing right there. Yeah, I'm so glad you saw that, because classic case of the book's opening in the wrong place, the wrong emphasis on things. There's a way to rework that and get that lovely, juicy stuff right up front, and then come in with everything else layering in as we build out from that.
Yeah. So, because like I got to I was like, okay, where's the rest of that? That's the part I want to see.
Yeah, it feels like there was a lot of work put into world building in this first 500 or 600 words. And world building is like what, Melissa?
Your underwear.
It needs to be there to keep everything in the right place and provide support and structure, but I don't ever need to see it.
Right. I agree.
I think that's also the challenge for fantasy writers in general, because you've built all this stuff and you've learned all these things and you've made this thing work exactly the way you need it to work, and so you want everybody to know. And so like I totally get that, but yeah, I like the underwear analogy.
You've got to choose the right pieces to bring into the pages so that they inform and give us things in context that we couldn't get any other way. We just need to absorb it. I'm with you. I love the underwear analogy. I'm stealing that, John.
Feel free. I've stolen enough off of you over the years.
I would assume you stole that too.
He probably has.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Basically, the reader needs to know what the reader needs to know when they need to know it.
The example I tend to use when I'm teaching or talking to somebody real specifically is, do you know when exactly anyone figured out how many bathrooms there are on the Enterprise? When they published a book of schematics about the Enterprise.
Exactly.
Because nobody needed to know before that.
Exactly.
But this is another book that would be up my alley if it were started in the right place. This is another book that's one of my genres that I love.
Yeah, something for people to be aware of and pay attention to. A lot of the things that we have seen out of this slush have been period fantasy, and not very much of what is being published right now is period fantasy. So the barrier to entry for that subgenre is significantly higher, because there's not a whole lot of it moving. There's not a whole lot of it that's selling really well. So we're not looking to publish the trend that is hot today. That's not what we're about. But if steampunk was a thing a decade ago and is a quarter of the thing that it was now, then only a quarter of those books are getting picked up now. So that's something to keep in mind as you're working on a product.
Mhm.
Says the man who is actively and vigorously purchasing Westerns.
Hey, I published, fantasy Western steampunk, a book called Fey West by Michael Allen, Fey West.
Great book.
Great voice, great book, but we purchased it knowing there's a slightly more limited audience for that than there might be for something else.
Yep.
So it's got to be really good. It's got to raise to a certain level to get past that worrisome nagging voice in the back of a publisher's head that says, am I going to put this book in a slot that I can put a book in that would sell 4 times more books than this particular genre would?
Yeah.
So, it's a higher ask when you submit that to a publisher.
Okay, moving on. Number 7. Title, Providence. Sign SF Post-Apocalyptic, 90,000 words. The wind gusted, pushing the canoe southwest. Clouds, the full range of grayscale now, obstructed yesterday's azure sky. Aided by the incoming front, the 2 men's progress down the creek was swift, and at least more rapid than with paddles alone. Scott had been silent most of the way. His sore neck warned him the stress was beginning to physically manifest. I'm not sure how to say this, Tanner, he said, stumbling over the name, but I'm out of my element here. I've camped and fished and cooked over a campfire, but this isn't that. Tanner picked up the barely contained panic in Scott's voice. What do we do? Tanner, quiet for some time, finally responded with one word. Survive. Okay.
I was being generous.
Okay.
I stopped in sentence 2 and I was being generous.
Hi, John.
Too, John.
Don't anthropomorphize the weather.
I had a problem with how do the clouds today obscure yesterday's sky? How did that work?
Yes.
Yeah. This doesn't get there for me. That was a hard pass on sentence 1.
Yeah, when you make the editors reread sentences, because they literally, I really didn't understand. I'm with Venessa how something could obstruct yesterday's sky. And I went ahead further thinking, okay, well, maybe this really odd, strange event will be explained. But no, yeah. So
I think they were just trying to say that yesterday was clear and today is not. But again, they're using way too many words and being way too floofy about it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pretty words,
term.
too.
Yes. Floofy. Yes, I actually use that floofy and speech tags. Frau speech tags, and then floofy sentence structures. Venessa has her own vernacular, clearly.
We all do.
I'm
Mine
sure all
just
the
usually has more 4-letter words in it.
Mine does too.
I'm sure your writers have to. Do you at least give your the writers you're editing a Venessa to normal codex?
Yes, I always explain the words I use.
I don't. Here's the thing for me. Given current events, post-apocalyptic is going to be a hard sell anyway. We're in uncertain times, and I am concerned about the marketability and saleability of apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic fiction moving forward 2 to 4 years from now. So it's going to have to really hook me from the jump if your genre starts there. And even going further, we're head hopping in paragraph 2. So that's also something that we don't get away with today. Scott's neck is sore, and that's warning him. But then Tanner picks up on the barely contained panic in Scott's voice. So we're bouncing back and forth, and third person omniscient doesn't work in today's market for post-apocalyptic fiction. It barely works in today's market for genre fiction.
Really, only Nora Roberts can do it.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to what I was talking about reader equity.
That's right.
You sell 5 million books, and I will let you bounce between as many brains as you want.
Yes.
Right.
Because I can put your name on the cover of a book and we will get paid.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But none of us can do that. None of us are moving 1 million copies of every book we sell.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't get that reader equity.
I kind of wonder if this is another case of something starting in the wrong place.
I think so.
I tried to scroll forward. I don't think it starts at any point in what we have.
No.
And just because it drives me crazy, 1 space after a period, not 2.
Yes.
I know we're,
I don't care if that's what you were taught in school.
And it used to be true, but it's not true anymore because we do digital layout instead of typesetting. I do want to talk a second about the post-apocalyptic marketability. I think whether it's marketable or not really depends entirely on the tone of the story, because right now in the indie publishing space, people who have post-apocalyptic but uplifting, like everything ends up working out at the end or whatever, they're selling the hell out of their books right now. I mean, they are going like hotcakes. But ones that are, and I'm not bringing that up to argue with what you just said.
No, I get it.
Looking at a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road, but I'm just bringing that up that it's not cut and dry, right? There's no, oh, this is not going to work or this is going to work.
Yeah.
A lot of it depends very much on the tone of the book. And I agree with Melissa. I don't think that it starts anywhere in what we have on here.
Yeah, I think that Jake Bible's Zburbia series, which is a zombie apocalypse series, is probably selling really well right now because those books are fun.
Yeah.
They're fun and funny, and while they're still dark and apocalyptic, there's a lot of heart to them. So yeah, I expect those are probably doing quite well.
Yeah.
We also published Jake. We did a book by him called Stone Cold Bastards, which is a demon apocalypse book, and gargoyles, churches are one of the safe places that demons can't get in. And the reason that book works is because there are characters that have humor, are competent. You want to be with those characters. You want to see what they're going to try. And I think part of the issue with Providence here is that we really don't have an identification with a particular character. We really don't get a feeling of competence. There's not humor to keep us going. You really got to look at those things and bond the reader to a character in those first few hundred words when you get a novel starting off, because we're going to ride this story with some individual, unique person, and you've got to look at that and make the reader be unable to turn away from that character. They want to see what's going to happen. They want to see the decisions they're going to make. So I think that could improve this, as if the author decided where the point of view was, how are you going to bring that character to us? Because right now we're just on doing a lot of canoe stuff.
This is like the drive and the walk, but with a canoe.
With a canoe.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
Yeah.
Can
Which
I-
is why a
this
lot of
really-
people don't start their books in the right place. It's
That's right.
common.
This really made me think of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn,
Yeah.
on the raft and down the river. And that's really not what I want to read right now.
Yeah, for real.
Um,
Yeah. And it goes again to, when you're opening your book or your story, whatever it is you're working on, we need to be grounded in setting, character, and action. Those are the things we need to have some understanding of. We don't necessarily have to know the reason the action is happening. We don't have to know any of that background. We just need to know something is happening and what it is.
And we need to know the character cares about
for
something.
the character. Yeah.
That
What
moment.
is the action for the character?
And
So-
I think it's important for writers to go to your bookcase, grab 15 or 20 books off your bookcase, and read the first 2 paragraphs of each of those. Then take a look at which ones of those books you finished, and see what the hook is, because that's what you've got. You've seen us. We've made it through 1 of 7, and one of them, Deb and I said we would send it on to someone else to read. That's the bar. It's incredibly high. And that's why we said when we started off with all of this, that's why going to conventions and actually meeting people face to face is so important. Because especially with an indie press, a small press, a mid-sized press, we typically aren't buying books. We're buying authors. I very seldom want 1 book. I want 3, 4, 7. I can't even count. I think, what are we going to end up with Gail and Larry Martin by the end of this year? 16?
16,812.
No, wait, 20. Because there are 5 collections.
Right. Oh, yeah.
4 collections and 4 novellas per collection. So 20 titles.
Mhm.
Like I said, 1,100.
That's the relationship. I've been published by Bellbridge for almost a decade at this point. And we're not done. We got 2 books left before we start talking about any other contracts.
Right. Which we've already started talking about this far ahead. Because we buy people. That's what we want to develop. That's what we're looking at. So.
Yeah.
The more I hear John and Deb talk, the more I realize how much John really did steal from her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I make no bones about that fact. I have stolen I have modeled the business practices of Falstaff on essentially 2 companies, and that's Bellbridge and Bain. Because I love the way Deb works, and Bain is one of the very few publishers that builds a brand around the press. And there are people who will buy every book that Bain puts out. And that's what we're working on with creating the Falstaff brand. That's why you'll see so many of our authors wearing the t-shirts at conventions, which are available at tpublic.com/FalstaffBooks.
I don't have a t-shirt yet.
Give it time.
Oh. Okay. Ready for the last one?
Yes.
We're ready.
Okay, number 8. Appetence and Silver, Fantasy, 6,800 words, so a short story. In January, after the craziness finished unfolding in Tofton, Colin turned in his notice, not even close to 2 weeks, packed his bag, and walked to the highway to thumb a fast ride. Where? How far? None of that mattered. Whatever it was that kept leading him to places where strangeness crept into his life, he intended to outrun it this time. No more cities, no more short-order chaos, no, for certain, more witchery-touched women headstrong determined on flirting with greatness. Okay.
I wasn't first this time, so somebody
weren't.
else start.
Again, it's the classic, I'm leaving my old life for the new life, and you're going to have to come along as I get in my car and drive down the highway. It's just, I think it's probably starting in the wrong place. So this is one of those where I would have stopped reading here. I would have glanced on through to see if a story started somewhere. So, and the voice, it didn't have a lot of voice for me. You know, everybody's got their own particular likes and dislikes and that sort of thing, but this is just didn't float my boat. So
I don't like the way that women are referred to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I scanned
well,
on
yeah, there's
through
that
it.
too, but okay, made me look bad.
You would think that mine and Vanessa's arms were spring-loaded.
It probably doesn't come across that way, but that last line in the first paragraph, that's what
A
did
little bit
it.
of hubris, huh?
Yeah,
It came across as misogynistic.
misogynistic as hell.
And
Yeah.
I that is most likely not the author's intention, but it still comes across that way, you know? So yeah, it comes across like an incel to me.
And
Yeah,
I've edited anthologies as well as long form fiction. And honestly, what brought this space to the end of the paragraph was the first chunk before the M dash. That was interesting to me.
Mhm.
And then blah, 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 blah. Okay, we're redoing Odd Thomas. And, oh, look, now we're a misogynistic Odd Thomas. See you, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love Odd Thomas. I love those books.
But Odd Thomas has already been written.
Right.
2 or 3 times. Because there's a couple of series in that, sequels in that book series.
Yep.
I almost raised my hand when it said none of that mattered.
I almost
Because
agree.
why tell us any of it if it doesn't matter?
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Don't write it.
And
This
I'm
is-
kind of concerned because it's only 6,800 words, and I'm like looking forward, and I'm not finding where it starts in any we have.
Because there's only 6,200 left of what?
Right.
I just took that for a typo. If this is only going to be a 6,800 short story piece, then we really do have an issue because those words are so critically important.
Yeah.
You get so few in a short story.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't a short story. Maybe it is.
Maybe it's 68,000.
Yeah. So
Either way.
this is not where it starts. Also, I was a little put off by the title because that first, is that a word?
Appetence.
No, either.
Okay, good. Because like
Oh, thank God.
Assume it's a name of somebody.
Right,
you know,
and that may absolutely be true. And if that's the case, that person they need to be in the first paragraph because to me it looks like a typo of apprentice.
It's
Actually,
a word.
no, it's a real word.
Is it?
Yeah,
What is
I'm
it?
A
looking
longing
it up.
or desire, according to Google.
Wow.
Strong natural craving or appetite.
Okay, and that's awesome. I like learning new words.
I don't like it in the title of a book.
Right,
No.
because it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't, because if it's not a word that's in regular use, you may as well not use a word at all. May as well just be called-
Oxford does say that it is rare.
Yes. And
Oxford is correct.
Oxford is always correct. But yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, it's a great word. Use it somewhere in the novel if you want to. I have no problems putting big words in the novels. If people want to look at what it is, they can freaking look it up.
Right.
You know?
Also, it feels like a period piece word.
Yeah.
And then
That it would
it's
set your
a
setting.
contemporary story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But fantasy?
There isn't any
Yes.
fantasy in the first 600 words.
That's true.
It's just
Yeah.
hitchhiking on the highway, basically.
And it's modern, so it would, if
There's-
anything, it would be urban fantasy, unless there's
Mhm.
some sort of interdimensional travel kind of aspect.
There's a little glimpse of it in the second paragraph.
Yeah,
Despite
lightning
the
instead
fact
of
that,
bullets.
and that's all we got. So,
And apparently witchery.
Yeah, it sounds like an urban
Military
fantasy.
touched women.
Right.
Great fantasy, which is fine because like I like urban fantasy is my jam right there. But
My mortgage.
Yeah.
And it has to be present day because later on there's a early 70s vintage vehicle.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So it has to
Yeah.
be not so far in the future that
Yeah.
still
Right.
wouldn't still run, but
I generally like I don't dislike the word usage in general. Like there's a lot of different sentence structures, different lengths. I think that's really good. You know, it doesn't feel like one of the ones we read earlier, and you mentioned it sounded like a middle grade one, and it was because it had just such simplistic sentence structures. And I think this I like the sentence structure of this. It reads, you know, word choice and how the sentence is created can use some work, but as far as like it reminds me of published books. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So so I think that's good. I'm trying to like also point out things that are not bad, you know.
Mhm.
So
But it's really telling how quickly and how viscerally Venessa and I both responded to that one little
yeah,
word that may or may not come off, be resonating with us the way the author intended. But it also doesn't matter. Intent doesn't always matter. It doesn't often matter. If it rings,
perception matters more than intent in almost all cases.
yeah. So
the problem I had specifically to talk about this, because if the author doesn't realize this is how it sounds, they're probably looking at it going, I don't know how to fix it. Why did you have to specify that they're all women? Are women the only ones? I mean, the main character's a man, and he's talking about doing witchery stuff. So you only have a problem with the women witches.
and using headstrong
Right, like it's
as a bad thing.
Right.
yeah.
And then the word flirting having a sexual connotation to it.
Ugh.
All of these things just pile on, and they affect how the book is going to be received.
Yeah.
And all of that could have been written a little differently, and the book could have opened with, he wouldn't be in this trouble if he just listened to his mother, if he just
That would be
practiced her
right.
recipes all these years, You know, you can sort of change things up a little bit and give this character more of a worldview, more of a life. There's a woman in his life. He acknowledges he should have listened to his mother. Doesn't say anything bad about her. I mean, I can see stuff here, but you know, you got to get in there and.
Which for our viewers, that was middle of second paragraph. The thing about his mother. That wasn't just Deb inserting that he.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just moved it up. Sorry.
Yeah, I hadn't read that far ahead, so I thought you were just adding it in. I was like, yeah, that'd be great.
And I want to be clear. I want to be clear that it's okay to have characters who are misogynistic or who are, you know, have some issue with, or, you know, racist or whatever. It's okay to have that, but you need to understand how that's going to be perceived. And if your main character is that, and part of your character arc is that they overcome their misogyny or they realize how shitty that is, that's okay, but you have to, it takes a very delicate touch to do it well so that we don't hate your main character as they start. It should
There have to be other redeeming traits.
It should definitely not be in your first paragraph when you're talking about this, because we have to like the character, and then you can show us this really horrible aspect of their personality or whatever, because then that's going to lead us to feel conflicted, and it's going to be so much more realistic, because even the people who are complete and total jerks and have horrible outlook on some aspect of you know, some human beings or whatever, they're not all evil, right? They have redeeming qualities. There are people who think they're great people. So definitely don't lead with the misogyny. That's unless you want us to hate your character, and I guess then that's okay.
But you're not
check
going to
out
sell
the
the book.
But you're not going to sell this book to me.
Yeah, check out the book Save the Cat. And definitely read that. And
They've got to save the cap for novelists too.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to reader equity too. If this were something like John wrote, I would say, okay, what's going on here? And I would keep reading.
There's going to be a point.
Yeah, because I know that he would have a reason for having that particular sentence.
Yeah, and I run into this problem all the time when I hear people say things like, well, Lord of the Rings did this, or Robert Jordan did it this way. Well,
a long time ago.
Neither of them are publishing today.
That's right.
None of us are writing in the marketplace that they were working in, and you haven't sold as many books as either of them.
Yes.
So you don't get to do that.
And you could even use this if you felt like you needed to keep that line because maybe they are misogynistic. Like, I would include something like, he didn't care that other people thought he blah, 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 whatever. Like, there's a way to temper it so that you're telling the reader that you understand, like, that you're telling the reader that this is a character trait. It's not you as the author. Because when I read this, it feels like you as the author.
Yeah.
Did that track for anybody else?
Yeah.
Especially now that I've read further and getting to the end of that second paragraph where Deb was pulling the listening to his mother bit, that really does temper a lot of it.
See, but to me, it comes back on the second page when he gets, because he comes and talks about trying to get picked up as a hitchhiker, and he says, women, when they bothered to stop, seem to be able to read him and not press. But
yes, there's a tone underlying how he is using his language and that sort of thing. I think you could edit that out, but I do think it goes back to, and we worry about this as editors, if you're doing your job correctly, you're working with author intent. How can you make that crystal? How can you bring that out in a way that it's working for the story? And I had an author who, the book called Frost Moon, Anthony Francis, the first line of this book, and don't think we didn't have, worry about it. I first started wearing a mohawk to repel lowlifes, barflies, vampires, Republicans, and so on, blah, blah, blah. So you're going, I have just irritated 50% of the population. But this is his character. I mean, this is who this woman is.
It's very clear it's the character. That's it.
It's very clear it's the character and not the point of view of,
In this piece, it's hard to tell whether it's the character or the author.
Right.
That's
the intent has to be crystal. It really, really does.
Yeah. So. And the one toward the end, like almost at the very end, when this female truck, not big truck driver, but regular truck driver, pickup driver, picks him up. It's a woman. She's wearing a baseball cap, whatever. She asks, where you heading? He says, out of the city. By the look of her, she'd be willing to go as far from pavement as the vehicle would take her. What does that mean? Does anybody? To me, because I already feel like this guy's a dick. Like automatically that feels like something a dude bro would say. Like it has some sexual connotation of some sort, and it's not nice. Except when I can't parse the sentence. I don't actually understand what it means.
I took it to mean that the character, that the woman driving was outdoorsy because
she's rugged.
Well, and I think it says that she had an SUV with a bike rack or something.
Oh, so she like goes off-roading. That's what that
Right.
Yeah.
Her car looks ready for it.
Oversized tires.
Yeah, see, because I didn't understand that, I automatically assumed it was some misogynistic comment. So
I thought so too, Venessa, and I think the reason I thought so too is because he described her in such detail.
Yeah.
Right before, in the paragraph before that, and then has this statement, pretty in a rugged, unexpected way, younger than he was. And that's coming right before that.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
that made me think that going as far as from the payment as the vehicle would take her, that made me think that had a other connotation.
Yeah.
And this story could have been written by a woman. We have no idea because
Right.
we don't
Right.
know who wrote this.
That's right.
So we're just talking about the words on the page. We don't know the author.
That's right.
The thing is that when readers form an opinion in their head, you want them to form it about the character and not about the author. And because the intention isn't clear, we kind of have a chip on our shoulder as we're reading.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You get that right on the head.
Yep.
Exactly what it was with that one.
Absolutely. I mean, and it doesn't break at a great place in on the page. It breaks right after she'd be willing to go as far from, it goes to a next, you don't get the full flow of that sentence. So your mind really is going, what? So.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's all 8 of the submissions that we had.
Thank you for letting us look at your work.
Yes.
We appreciate
Absolutely.
This is a whole lot easier on us when we know you're not actually 10 feet away from us.
Staring at us.
This is about average for the ones of these that I've done. We made it through 1 in 8. That's pretty typical from what I've seen over the years.
And I do want to say, if any of these were your story and the things that we said were like hurt your feelings or made you feel some kind of way, please understand that we're telling you guys this so that you learn, so that you understand, so you can see how to make it better. It's all about making you better, because that's our jobs, literally.
And if you feel like, well, they just didn't understand what I meant, well, that's problematic too. Because, if we didn't understand, all 5 of us didn't understand what you meant, then what you meant wasn't clear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The onus is on the writer to be clear. It is not on the reader to understand what the writer means. And that goes for anything.
Yeah.
So.
And if you're thinking, well, you didn't get to the good part, well, maybe you need to start with the good part. That goes back to not starting in the right place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Please start with the good part.
Yeah.
Read openings.
Yes.
Lots of them.
One of my professors in my MFA program, he always said, pull down all of your favorite books and read the first page. Just the first page. And for every one you read, write down why it grabbed you. And you will see patterns in why all of these grabbed your attention and kept your attention.
I'd say the last 100 books you bought in the last 5 years, read all of, that you finished, read the openings of all of those. Another contemporary, get now work.
Yeah, I was going to say another thing to do is look at the Amazon best sellers list. Read
samples.
Yeah, look in their free samples. You don't have to spend a lick of money. You read, look inside and read their first couple pages of all of them and see what they all have in common. They all start in the right place.
And a lot of them probably didn't the first time.
That's true.
True.
That's true. Yeah.
So I wanted to look up, while we were talking about that, I wanted to look up the beginning of a book that I really loved. I heard the mailman approach my office door half an hour earlier than usual. He didn't sound right.
Keep going. I want to read some more.
Well, Dwight Swain says
on your
start on the
bookcase.
day that is different.
Yes.
That's different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our expectation is immediately something's wrong, something's going to happen.
Yes.
So.
That is the first 2 sentences of Stormfront by Jim Butcher. The first Dresden Files book.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one did okay.
A little bit.
I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you all for taking part of this, giving our attendees just a little taste of con when we couldn't have it in these wonderful times.
Thanks to
this-
everybody who was brave enough to submit. It's hard.
Exactly.
It takes guts.
Mhm.
And thanks to
Right.
Garfield for coming in a
Yeah.
couple of times and hanging out with us.
And hanging out with us.
Because you all had something. You might have had character, you might have had world building, you might have had, you know, great dialogue, you might have had a good opening and then stumbled somewhere else. Everybody had something going for them, but you got to put it all together, you know, when you get a publisher to pay you some hard-won cash to buy your book.
Yes.
So this has been JordanCONline. It's got Slush. I am Richard Fife, director of the Writer's Track. Again, thank you to John Hartness from Falstaff Books, Melissa McArthur, also of Falstaff Books, Venessa Giunta, also of Falstaff Books, and Deborah Dixon of Bell Books.
Which one of these is not alike?
It's
Have a
all
good
right.
one.
I
Stay
bet
safe.
she can still write. I bet she can still write a hell of a novel.
It's like
Oh,
the
you're so nice.
6 degrees of John Hartness.
Yes, that's what we're playing.
So, be good, stay safe, be healthy. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.